And hello, welcome, good morning, Canada. It is Thursday. It is the 26th of June. We're coming to the end of Pride Month. Happy Pride, everybody. I hope everybody had a good month. I know some of you have not, and that is unfortunate. I don't know what to tell you. America sucks right now. I have a couple things to go over today. We'll see how much we can get through it, but well, let's just get started. Why don't we just get started? EU summit with Canada happened. Some announcements have come through that, which is announcing that Canada is joining the attempt or the project of remilitarizing Europe, which is really good for us because that's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be a lot of money. It's going to move the rest of the world away from proprietary military, like American military, which I think is probably good for everybody. I mean, as much as it's going to hurt America, I think in the long run it's better for America also, because as we know, monopolies aren't actually prosperous. They're more about control. Because you have enough money, you don't need any more money. What you want is more power. So monopolies are not actually good for an economy. They're actually really bad for economy, especially a free market. So having one country controlling everybody's military on the entire planet, not a great move. There was also NATO meeting, where Trump is again, as usual, exposed as a petulant child. He couldn't handle the press, which you know, it's, it seems to me that a lot of the way things work with these right-wing extremists, man-children, and they're all men, like Kristi Noem, for example. As soon as you take them out of their bubble where they are very much in control of the situation and very much have like a chokehold on what's going on and all of the power in the situation, they look very silly. So it's like taking Charlie Kirk and putting him into Cambridge. He looks very silly. If you take Donald Trump and you have him talking to reporters that aren't American reporters, he looks very silly. He looks very silly. So yeah, he threw a tantrum. Whatever. No surprise there. So, looks like there's been a sign on to, by everybody, including America, about Palestine and getting a ceasefire on that, as well as some talk about Iran. There's also been talks of Ukraine and Russia and, He would melt if he was forced to interact and answer questions on camera for an hour by hardline journalists, like a real journalist. I saw a clip of Donald Trump sitting there being a little whiny bitch baby because he started to insult a woman journalist who's a wartime journalist. Like, this woman goes out into the field during wartime and journals what's going on. You think you're going to scare her, Donald? Yeah, I don't fucking think so. Anyway, it's no surprise that Republicans hate women. But we're not going to get too deep into that. But the main thing we're going to talk about today is Bill C... what is this called? Bill C... what the fuck? Bill C2 that people are upset about. So there was one called C5, but that was the Ontario one, not the federal one. It's the federal one. So I had seen this article on The Guardian, and I wasn't impressed by its framing, right? Canadians say no to Trump, so why is Mark Carney pushing a MAGA-inspired border bill? He's fucking not, dude. That's not a thing that's happening. Like, it's ridiculous. And, like, the part of it was like, oh, this is a good question. It's not a good question. I don't want to pick on Greg. Greg has been relatively straightforward, although a little bit dodgy about actually answering what the concerns are. It wasn't satisfactory to me, but I think they tried their best to like engage and tell me what the hell they're talking about. So I'm not gonna disparage Greg here, but like I don't think this is a legitimate question. Like, because, one, MAGA-inspired bill is already, like, rage bait, right? That's rage bait. So let's opinion. If it goes ahead, we will see the construction of a surveillance state that is some ways worse than the United States. What? Like, are you worse than the United States currently has its military out in the streets and sending people to gulags, and recently just detained somebody and sent them back after detainment because they had a meme of JD Vance on their phone. Like, what are you even talking about? Like, this is so disingenuous. But let's take a look. Canada got duped. Oh yeah. Did we? We avoided electing an outright Trump sympathizer, but we still elected a prime minister who will align our policies with the United States. Despite all the anti-Trump rhetoric and celebration of the idea that Canada was independent and had no desire to be like the United States, we are now passing MAGA-inspired legislation. All right, inflammatory. Let's keep going. The newly elected Mark Carney government... Because here's the other thing. Who else would you have voted for? Who's the other option? Outside of, if you're not going to pick Polyev, and you're not going to pick Mark Carney, who are you going to pick? The Green Party? The Bloc? The Bloc doesn't want to be the prime minister. The NDP? Who completely, just completely shit the bed in the last election? Yeah, I don't fucking think so. So there's literally no other option, really. Ugh. The newly elected Mark Carney government tabled a border bill that will give law enforcement sweeping powers in obtaining citizens' data and will align Canada with the U.S.'s refugee policies. Bill C-2, or the Strong Borders Act, is presented as a border security bill. However, its reach extends beyond border applications to nearly all legislation. In alignment with the attack on immigrant communities in the United States, this bill is anti-immigrant and, in particular, anti-refugee. The legislation changes the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to grant the Minister of Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship extensive power to cancel immigration documents and to suspend or cancel intake of any immigration stream of if a high number of applications are pending. That's bureaucracy, my guy. This isn't streamlining the immigration system. This is mass deportation by administrative means, rather than law enforcement. Well, hopefully they will explain how. In addition, there is no appeal process for these measures. A significant number of refugees will not be granted a hearing since the legislation, quote, proposes to prevent claims from even reaching the Immigration and Refugee Board, quote, according to the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. All right, let's check the source. Joint statement. Canada puts refugees claimants at risk. So let's see what this bill actually says, right? House of Commons, of Canada, Bill C-2, right? Act respecting certain measures relating to the security of the border between Canada and the United States and respecting other related security measures, right? So this thing is fucking long. Like, we are not gonna read this whole thing today. And even if I did want to read this whole thing on stream, it would be very long. So let's just search, here we go. Summary. Part 1 amends the Customs Act to provide the Canada Border Service Agency with facilities free of charge for carrying out any purpose related to the administration or enforcement of that act and other acts of Parliament, and provide officers of that agency with access to certain locations, goods destined for export. It also includes transitional provisions. So, hotels, food, whatever. 2 amends the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act to create a new temporary, accelerated scheduling pathway that allows the Minister of Health to add precursor chemicals to Schedule 5 to that act. It also regulates, It also makes related amendments to the Controlled Drug and Substance Act's police enforcement regulations and the Precursor Control Regulations. Part 3 amends the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and the Cannabis Act to conform with the Governor in Council may, on the recommendation of the Minister of Safety and Emergency Preparedness, make regulation exempting members of law enforcement from the application of any provision of the criminal code that creates drug-related inchoate? Inchoate? I don't know what this word is. I don't know this word. Time to look up a word.
Inchoate.
Oh, inchoate. To begin or start something, to cause or bring about, to make a start. Inchoate. Inchoate officers when they are undertaking lawful investigation. Lawful investigations. 4. Amends the Canada Post Cooperation Act to permit the demand, seizure, detention, or retention of anything in the course of post only in accordance with an Act of Parliament. It also amends that act to expand the Canadian Post Cooperations Authority to open mail in certain circumstances to include the authority to open letters. So basically, they're saying, hey, we're allowed to look at your shit if we have a court order. Part 5 amends the Oceans Act to provide that Coast Guard services include activities related to security and authorize the responsible minister to collect, analyze, and disclose information and intelligence. 6. Amends the Department of Citizenship. You don't like the Oceans one? What's the problem with the Oceans one? Include activities related to security and authorize the responsible minister to collect, analyze, and disclose information and intelligence from the Coast Guard. What's the problem with 5? Six, amends the Department of Citizenship and Immigration Act to authorize the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration to disclose for certain purposes and subject to any regulations personal information under the control of the department within the department and to certain other federal and provincial government entities. So that's just, to me, this reads as, hey, we're letting the parts of the government share information with each other. All right, April, tell me which one's your tell me what your problems are so I can know what you're talking about. The delay. It also amends the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to authorize and make the making of regulations relating to the disclosure of information collected for the purposes of that act to federal departments and agencies. 7. Amends the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to, among other things, eliminate the designated countries of origin regime. Oh, interesting. B, authorize the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration to specify the information and documents that are required in support of a claim for refugee protection. Okay, that makes sense. Authorize, this is the one that people are having a major issue with. They're having an issue with the mail and they're having an issue with immigration, right? Authorize the Refugee Protection Division of the Immigration and Refugee Board to determine that claims for refugee protection that have not yet been referred to the Refugee Protection Division have been abandoned in certain circumstances. Okay. Provide the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration with the power to determine that claims for refugee protection that have not yet been referred to the Refugee Protection Division have been withdrawn in certain circumstances. Okay, that makes sense. E, require the Refugee Protection Division and the Refugee Appeal Division to suspend certain proceedings respecting a claim for refugee protection if the claimant is not present in Canada. Okay. Clarify that decisions of the Immigration and Refugee Board must be rendered and reasons for those decisions must be given. Okay. In the manner specified by its chairperson. Okay. authorize regulations to be made setting out the circumstances in which the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration or the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness must designate, in relation to certain proceedings or applications, a representative for persons who are under 18 years of age or who are unable to appreciate the nature of the proceedings or application. Okay, so that seems all okay to me. I'm not seeing what is being said here about what makes this Trumpy in any way, shape, or form, or that this has anything to do with detaining anybody or deporting anybody. The two that are closest to that is like, hey, if these people aren't in the country, or hey, if these people are not showing up, or hey, if these people are not, like, under certain circumstances. So the question is what are the certain circumstances? Like, this is all this is saying, hey, no, listen, all this stuff needs to be able to be, like, tracked, all this stuff needs to be able to be explained, like, explanations need to be given. Like, I don't see the issue here. This doesn't, so April, can you tell me why? I don't love anything about the immigration reform. It feels a little authoritarian-ish. Can you tell me, like, what you're... I'm not seeing that. So I'm just looking for some kind of... What about this looks authoritarian-ish to you? It puts all the power of determination in the hands of a select few people who used to just enforce the rules. The power of determination. How do you see that? Because the power of determination, you're talking about like you're talking about like C and D, right? Like authorize the Refugee Protection Division of the Immigration and Refugee Board, which is like not one or two people, to determine that claims for refugee protection that have not yet been referred to the Refugee Protection Division have been abandoned in certain circumstances. Like, stuff like that? Is that what you mean? To make that kind of determination when they're not receiving the paperwork being forwarded to them? But that this thing has to be documented and explained? They can't just, like, decide that, right? You'll notice that up here that they have to specify the information and documentation required. Right? So it's not arbitrary. They would have to specify the information and documentation required, and then under certain circumstances, if they're not being provided that information, they could say that they could determine that it's been withdrawn in certain circumstances or abandoned in certain circumstances, but those reasons for the decisions must be given in a manner specified by the chairperson. So whether that be like via like written format, presented format, and that the decision has to be clarified. Which means that these groups are all being held accountable by multiple cross offices. So I'm just not seeing what you're seeing. Anyway, it also includes transitional provisions. Part 8 amends the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, among other things, authorize the governor and council to make an order specifying that certain applications made under that act are not to be accepted for processing, or that the processing of those applications is to be suspended or terminated when the governor and council is of the opinion that it is in the public interest to do so. So this is wartime type stuff. So this is a check and balance, right? This is a... clarify these notes. This is a check and balance, right? This is like, if the governor and council wants to do this, right, it needs to be specific, and it needs to also be with the public interest, right? Oh yeah, no worries. Like, I'm not trying to say that, like, you're wrong or anything. I'm just not seeing what you're seeing, and I'm just trying to articulate the way I'm interpreting this. Authorize the governor and council to make an order to cancel, suspend, or vary certain documents issued under that act, or to impose or vary conditions when the governor and council is of the opinion that it is in the public interest to do so. Okay? So, just so people know, this doesn't mean it's just whatever. When it says the governor and council is of the opinion that is in the public interest to do something, that's not just a guy making a decision, right? That is like the governor and council doesn't just have a vibe one day and changes his mind. This is a process that he then has to justify to other pieces of government and as well as to the court to get that passed, right? So it's not something that he just has the authority to flippantly change these things on a day-to-day basis. That's not. I understand how that might how that would read if like you're not used to like the way our government documents are written, but this isn't like, oh, this guy just has that opinion one day and this says out loud that, well, this is in the public interest. No, this is more like, hey, we're at war with America, so if you are an American immigrant, you need to, and you're in the middle of being processed, or you're at the start of being processed, your processing is going to be suspended. Like, that's the kind of thing that it would be used under. Now, if you want to think about, like, how this could be weaponized, which I think is a good thing to do. I think it's a good idea to talk about and think about, like, what's the worst case scenario of something like this being utilized. And I guess you could say that you could pull they want to, like, frame it like it's fucking Trump, right? You say, we don't like people from Venezuela, so we're gonna, pull up everybody from Venezuela and send them out, right? And, like, get them out of our country. But you'll notice that there are two things in this that would stop that from happening. One is eliminate the designated countries of origin regime. And two, that this is nothing to do with deportation of people that are here already. This has to do, like, so people who are, like, of Venezuelan, for example, descent, right? This is people that are pre-processed. Sorry, excuse me. So you don't get, like, ice on the streets with something like this. You would need more than what this is. And again, being able to be flexible, I think, is good. Can that flexibility be weaponized? Sure. That's what the checks and balances are for. So I can understand concern. I can understand being like, maybe I'm not the most comfortable with this. But I don't view this as MAGA, and I don't view it as authoritarian. This doesn't read anything like MAGA documents. For the application of an order referred to in paragraph B, require a person to appear for an examination, answer questions truthfully, and produce all relevant documents or evidence that an offer requires. Okay, so if they are to make a change, right, or impose any varying conditions, any individual that's going to affect is guaranteed this due process to make a case one way or another. And they're given the opportunity. So this is ensuring due process for so things literally can't be, you can't just be deported. Things can't just flip on a dime. If something flips on a dime, you are required to have an examination, because it says require a person to appear for examination. That requires the person, but that also requires the examiners. Like, they have to be there to go through the process. And when these things are set forward and these things are clear, right, where it's just like, no, listen, the specify the information, the documents that are required to support the claimant. Right? So if the council, the governor and council, decides to change any of these things, any individual that is affected is able to and required to appear in person. to then be like, hey, here's my documents, this is what was said I needed, here's the clarification, da-da-da-da-da-da. That is their legal due process. Authorize the governor and council to make regulations prescribing circumstances in which a document issued under that act can be canceled, suspended, or varied, and in which officers may terminate the processing of certain applications made under the act. Right, so if you are going to make any changes, you have to be clear about what your changes are, right? And explain it. Part 9 amends the Immigration Refugee Act to add 2 new grounds of ineligibility for claims for refugee protection, as well as powers to make regulations respecting exceptions to those new grounds. It also includes a transitional provision respecting the retroactive application on those new grounds. So they're not just saying, hey, there's new rules. If you don't follow these new rules that you didn't know about before, get the fuck out. Part 10 amends the proceeds of crime of money laundering. Okay, so like I do not see how this is Trumpian. I don't even see how this is authoritarian. I don't see how this is really problematic at all. I can understand why people don't really like part 4, but that it's really just, in my opinion, more of like the American individualism mind virus. That kind of that individual, my rights as an individual circumsede the right to everybody else's safety, right? So like, this is, for example, like, let's say there is a credible bomb threat, and they find out that the person making the bomb threat was you, and they take you to court, and they go to court, and they get a fucking warrant, and they're like, listen, we need to look at this person's mail, because they're calling in and mailing bombs around. The court can then authorize that warrant. And the Postal Service is able to comply with that. So let's call it like the worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario, an authoritarian government in Canada, which already, like, I feel like if we have an authoritarian government in Canada, the checks and balances have already failed, right? But let's pretend, because at that point, you know what, that's taking the example too far. Because as soon as you have an authoritarian, it doesn't matter what the laws are. They're going to do whatever. Like, look at what Trump's doing. The laws don't matter once you have an authoritarian who's already, like, blown past all of the checks and balances anyway. So if you've already got somebody who's blown past the checks and balances, whatever these laws are irrelevant. Like, it's not going to matter. They're going to weaponize something appropriately or inappropriately. It's on the checks and balances to ensure that that doesn't happen, right? So let's take, for example, let's say it's not an authoritarian, it's somebody well-meaning, right? And somebody well-meaning is like, well, we have the truckers, right, in Ottawa that are behaving badly, and we want to intercept their... We want to know more about them, so we're going to intercept their mail, right? And get, like, find out who their friends are, and find out if there's, like, some cabal and blah, blah, blah. But all of this is speculation. You still have to go through the court. It doesn't mean the cop can just go to the post office and say, hey, I need all this person's mail, and go through it. No, there's still a process that has to be followed. My Unfinished Stock for Two said, don't be an authoritarian D-bag and like and share. Yeah. So I don't see, like, I think Greg's main concern here is that, where did he say? Parts 4, 8, and 14 are particularly troubling. And they said, my concern is a loss of privacy without seeming any oversight. See, I just don't agree with that. There is already oversight built in. It's inside of the document as well as by pre-established rules, right? Loss of due process for immigrants, that's just not true. Like, that's just that it literally says that there's a requirement. right? There's a requirement for due process that's written in here. So I don't agree with that. It's just trust us bill, which I don't see that at all. Problem is they won't be the government forever. I think that's a reasonable concern to think about. Would you trust Pierre with these powers? And the thing is like, I wouldn't have to. Because these powers aren't something that are being given to fucking Pierre. And if Pierre is weaponizing it, that's what the checks and balances are for. Again, I can understand why people, like, don't like the idea and it feels icky. But this is well within our, like, rules inside of the Supreme Court in Canada, right? The Supreme Court in Canada has already ruled that your individual rights do not inherently supersede the right to safety of everybody else in the country. Like, the way our charter is written means that, and it's written in that it's like, hey, listen, if you're a threat to society, we can put you in jail. If we have reasonable cause, we can go and look through your shit. Hey, Todd, good to see you. I mean, you might like it, but it is within our current rule of law. I mean, if you want to change that, fine. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't want that changed even necessarily, but it is currently well within the scope of the things we do in Canada. So, like, for example, people got really fucking pissy at Trudeau because they say he, quote-unquote, illegally used the Emergency Act to freeze people's bank accounts. And it's like, no. No. Incorrect. Okay. The other one he said, let's see, was part 4. Hold on. 14 was the other one. But I guess his problem with 8 was literally says the required fucking due process. Okay, whatever. Part 14, let's see. Part 14 amends various acts to modernize certain provisions respecting the timely gathering of production of data and information during an investigation. It, among other things, A, amends the criminal code to, among other things, 1, facilitate access to basic information that will assist in the investigation of the federal offenses through an information demand or a judicial production order to a persons who provide service to the public. 2. Okay, so that's... Companies have to... From my understanding, that's like a VPN, right? Like Google fucking... Right? But to basic information, not all of your private information. So you'd have to define what basic information is, but if I'm not mistaken, basic information is... has a definition. Legally speaking. So let's see. Clarify the response time for production orders and the ability of peace officers and public officers to receive and act on certain information that is voluntarily provided to them and on certain information that is publicly available. Okay, that makes sense. Specify certain circumstances in which peace officers and public officers may obtain evidence, including subscriber information, in exigent circumstances. So, yeah, so if you're like harassing somebody on Twitter, checking your followers and stuff like that, like who's subscribed to you, that makes sense to me. So, like, for example, let's take the truckers again. Truckers that were deemed to be doing terrorist acts by law, right? So there's already a process that had to be followed to determine as such. The police go to get a warrant, and then the judge says, yeah, let's say the yes goes to the warrant, and then they take the warrant to PayPal, or they take the warrant to, I think the big one was, what's it called? Not GoFundMe, not Kickstarter. Well, GoFundMe was one of them. GoFundMe and Patreon, right? Because this group was funneling money through Patreon and through GoFundMes to fund their terrorist activity, right? So that would mean that the people who are funding the terrorists are able to be tracked backwards through something like this, right? So how would you weaponize it, right? Well, you could weaponize it by getting the subscribers or getting a Patreon for, like, so let's say, like, a public officer, let's say a comedian, right? Let's say a comedian is making jokes about the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister doesn't like it. Can the Prime Minister weaponize this to find out who is supporting, what's the word I'm looking for? Who's supporting the comedian? No, the answer is no, right? The comedian would have to have already been determined or in the process of being determined, and there has to be a warrant that has been put forward in the case to get that information. You can't just be like, no, I want this information because I don't like that guy. That's just not what it says. It says circumstances, not situations, but, yeah, whatever. This is for, like, this is necessity. In necessary circumstances. The necessary circumstances, right? So, specify certain circumstances in which they could. Right? So, this isn't saying, you can now do this. This is saying, hey, we want to be able to do this, but we need to specify what those circumstances are. The point of number 3 is that it is explaining that these things are unclear and they need to be made clear. Does that make sense, April? In Canada, circumstances allow police to conduct warrantless searches or seizures when there is an imminent threat to public safety or a risk of evidence being lost or destroyed. The exception to the warrant requirement is narrowly constructed that requires a demonstration of need for immediate action. Yes. So, like terrorism, like a bomb threat, like things like that. Who determines what is necessary? The law. Specify certain circumstances, right? Okay, amends the criminal code to, among other things, specify certain circumstances in which peace officers and public officers may obtain evidence, including subscriber information, in necessary circumstances. So this is asking to specify what those circumstances are to enable the police to legally make that call. So the police have to make the call, or the district has to make that call. Generally, it wouldn't be an individual officer making that call. That would be like the precinct. So like that would be the investigator would be, like the head investigator would be making that call. Normally, this isn't something like a beat cop is doing, right? Like, the beat cop is not the person, like, the OPP on the side of the road, we're not talking about deciding to pull somebody over on the side of the street, right? Not that kind of urgency, not that kind of situation. It's more like there's a hostage situation. Can we get information on this guy? And the person making that call is going to be the person in charge of that situation. So sometimes, in moments, cops make the decision and courts rule it legal or not later. Welcome to qualified immunity. That's not how Canada functions. Right? That's an American thing. The way qualified immunity works is, get down with OPP. So, this is going to be a bit of a slog to get through if you want to talk about qualified immunity in Canada, but It's in a recent decision, Canada Attorney General, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that federal and provincial governments do not have absolute immunity from claims for charter damages following from the adoption of unconstitutional legislation. As a result, if a law violates rights protected by a Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, then in certain limited circumstances, charter damages may be claimed against the state. That's the short answer. Qualified immunity in Canada is not, like, it doesn't work that way here. I'll give you the link. Imminent threat, hot pursuit. Yeah, things like, yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, I can understand why some of these things are going to read as really aggressive to a lot of people, right? I'm not saying don't be concerned, right? I'm not saying, hey, don't look out for misuses or misapplications of this. I think these things, like any law, at all, can be weaponized, right? And it can be misused. That's what the checks and balances are for. You're never going to write a perfect law. You're never going to write something that it can't be abused. It can be abused, and criminals will try to abuse it. That's what the checks and balances are for. That's why something like what we were looking at number 8 requires a hearing. There's a requirement, right? It's not just one. The same with this governor and council is of the opinion that it's in the public interest to do so. You have to convince the public, or the public has to be the one bringing this concern forward, and then the governor general has to agree with it. And sorry, not governor general, governor and council. Then the governor and council also has to convince that it's reasonable. Then it can be put forward, right? God damn. My civics class in high school did me dirty. There's so much shit in here. You want to know what we fucking cover in high school? 1/2 of a semester. Not even a full course. 1/2 of a semester. There really needs to be a course in high school that is Canada legal, like laws of Canada. Fuck. Where was I? It said 14, right? Information that's voluntarily provided to them or publicly available. So, like, basically, like, if somebody says out loud, hey, I committed a crime publicly, the police are allowed to use that. Specify certain circumstances, blah, blah, blah. Allow a judge or judge to authorize in a warrant a peace officer or public officer to obtain tracking data or transmission data that relates to anything that is similar to a thing in relation to which data is authorized to be obtained under the warrant and that is unknown at the time the warrant is issued. Okay, so I think people... My mom got Canadian law in high school and it was a whole course? Back in my day, education was better? Fuck. They teach you civics in grade 9, so you'll be old enough to forget everything. So you'll forget everything by the time you're old enough to vote. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you'll notice this is for a judge to make a decision on, to allow the judge to authorize. So this is a circumstance where you have to obtain a warrant, which has to follow all the rules of obtaining a warrant, right? So there's these pre-existing regulations and rules and oversight. Oh, thank you, Jason. I really appreciate that. Thanks. Obtaining tracking data. So tracking data or transmission data. This is about human trafficking and about child porn. That's what that's about. Maybe harassment. This could definitely be used. Like, so you guys know that we've been following the case of, like, Steve and Aaron and Veda and blah, 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 blah. And then there was, like, a whole bunch of death threats that were going around and nobody could figure out who it was. And it ended up being, like the FBI got involved more than once, but nobody ever got charged for it, right? Well, there's something about that maybe I'll bring up later, but I don't want to get bogged down in the weeds of the company right now. but the fact that they can't obtain the data to do the investigation properly. Right? So, like, where were you on the night of blah blah blah? Well, your phone was here. Why was your phone here? Right? That kind of thing. Or, like, transmission data, to be like, oh, you sent this image, or you sent this message, and this person received it, and we were able to take the tracking data and track it backwards, right? It still has to be within the scope of the warrant. So it's not like, hey, we just get access to all of your transmission data and all of your location data. That's not what this says. And I think that's what people are afraid of. Like, oh, I don't want the government to have access to my personal information when it's not at all. And that's not what this is. I mean, it is your personal information, but it's not all of it. And it's not willy-nilly. It's not just the cops saying, hey, give me your phone, I'm allowed to look through it. And then checking your browser history, right? Like, that's not what it is, right? And that's not what it says. Provide and clarify authorities by which computer data may be examined. Again, provide and clarify. How the fuck do we do this? How do we deal with this? There's a lot of cybersecurity problems. A lot. And there's a lot the police... If anybody who's been on the internet for any period of time, you know that people have been harassed and threatened and sexually harassed and like all things like revenge porn and stuff like that. And you call the police and the police are like, I can't do anything. I can't do anything for you. These laws or these changes and amendments are meant to give the police access to be able to do something about it. But you'll notice that this language is incredibly careful. It's saying, provide and clarify how authorities can get to this. Allow them to authorize through a warrant process to get this information. Specify what these certain circumstances are, right? And again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but Canada does not have this individualism ideology that permeates America, and you can see how well that's going for them, especially during COVID. We don't have that. Our Supreme Court doesn't have that law that says your rights circumsede the safety of everybody around you. The law is able to invade your personal space under certain circumstances through a due process. Why do people get behind a keyboard and suddenly lose all common sense? Two reasons, and this is a really interesting thing to talk about, and maybe I should ask maybe Luke and Chris would be the two people who do a lot of psychology would be willing to chat about. Two main reasons, in my opinion, all right, as not a professional, as just somebody who's experienced it a lot. I think it's one, degrees of separation. So you are not talking to the person, right? You're talking to an image on a screen, and you're a persona of a persona of a persona, right? So the degrees of separation, and two, immunity / anonymity, right? You are allowed to do whatever the fuck you want because you don't believe that there are any consequences to your actions. Yeah, a lack of repercussions. Yeah. So, like, you're like, I can do whatever I want, I can say whatever I want, because nobody's gonna punch me in the face. Right. Yeah, and it's a perceived anonymity. It's not total anonymity. That's why people who act like assholes freak out when somebody's like, you do know I know where you live, right? Like, you've told everybody where you live. I'm being threatened! Bruh. Bruh. You're doxing me! Yeah! I fucking hate that shit. I hate that shit so much. It's so irritating. It's so stupid. Like, for example, like, I know where Black Wolf lives, right? Like, of course I do. It's not hard to find out. Right? You know what I mean? Like, you know his full name, you know, like, things that he's fucking said, you know, like, all kinds of stuff. I'm fairly confident that I know where he lives. So, like, it's... somebody could figure out where I live. Does that mean they should do anything with that information? Not necessarily. I think if I published somebody's information, it would be problematic. But if Sean publishes his own information, what am I supposed to do about that? Nothing. I hope you had a good dinner. Alright. Where was I? Make consequential amendments to the Foreign Publishers Advertising Service Act. Ooh, I like that. Oh, I like that a lot. Oh, I'm curious. In my mom's basement. Make a consequential amendment to the Foreign Publishers Advertising Act. So, you know how I've been talking about and complaining about Postmedia? That's that. That's what that is. Ooh, please give me more of that. I want them all fucking shut down. I want them kicked the fuck out. Or at least they have to change their name to not pretend that they're fucking Canadian. I'm gonna provide the link that Jason did on Exigent Circumstances, so if anybody wants to dive into that, I'm gonna read more of this after. I greatly appreciate that, thank you. Amend the Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Act to allow the Minister of Justice to authorize a competent authority to make arrangements for the enforcement of a decision made by an authority of a state or entity that is empowered to compel the production of transmission data or subscriber information that is in possession or control of a person in Canada. Do you know what that is? That's like fucking Facebook and AI scrapers. Oh boy. I like that it specifies that it has to be a competent authority. So, like, for example, right, if Canada says that Facebook's not allowed to sell a Canadian individual's information off of Facebook to a third party, whatever third party that might be, that would mean that and Facebook decides it doesn't want to comply. This is this is saying, hey, the Minister of Justice is allowed to authorize an authority to enforce that law on Facebook. The authority would, the competency would be defined by the Minister of Justice and by the checks and balances that are on the Minister of Justice. So this isn't like people voting for this. This is like the people in power have to agree and assign those people. I do like that it says a competent authority, but this is a legal document. This is when it says a competent authority, it doesn't mean the individuals have to literally be competent. That's not what it means. It means that the authorizing a competent authority means that it has to have a clear, like, it isn't talking about individual competency. It's talking about that it has to be like have a comprehensive goal and initiative of what it is supposed to be doing and what it's trying to accomplish, and like set restrictions. That's what it means by competent. A competent authority also wouldn't be an individual, right? A competent authority would be like a council or like a review board, like that kind of thing. Amends the Canadian Security Intelligence Service Act to, among other things, 1, facilitate access to basic information that will assist the Canadian Security Intelligence Service in the performance of its duties and functions under Section 12 or 16 of that Act through information demands given to persons or entities that provide services to the public and judicial information orders against such persons as entities. Clarify the response time for production orders. So, time limits on how long it's supposed to take to collect this information and get this information to the authorities when it's requested. And, yeah, you have to share the information when it's fucking required. And it's, again, we're back to basic information. For anybody who doesn't know what basic information entails in Canada, that's like the information on your driver's license. That's basic information. Which is like gender, age, date of birth. Well, I mean, age is in your date of birth. Name, legal name, gender, date of birth. I think your eye color is, interestingly enough, is on your driver's license. I don't remember, but like this is all like basic information. The information you're submitting with your taxes. So like your address, like anything that's in your SIN number, anything like height, nationality, like yeah, your basic information. Amend the controlled. So this is just saying, hey, listen, facilitate the basic information to fucking security. Sure. Yeah, citizenship. Yeah, citizenship. Actually, I don't know if citizenship status is on your driver's license. Hold on. Hold on. I need to just look at a driver's license. Okay. Exchange information, buying a car, leasing a car. Just, you know what? I just need a picture. Just give me a picture of a driver's license. Canadian driver's license. I don't have one. This is Florida. Okay, here we go. Wow, this is blurry as fuck. Can you give me one that doesn't look like shit? Okay, here we go. Here's an example one. This is just from Google. So, like, name, address, postal code, like your whole address shtick. Date, issued and expiry date, height, male, level. I don't know what the J is. It says rest. I don't know what the J is. Date of birth, and then like your driver's license number. Right. And not everybody's going to have a driver's license number, but that might be... This I would include... Anything on here, I would say this is your general... This is basic information. Again, basic information is, like, not random. It's not like, oh, whatever we happen to be asking for. Just basic information. They don't have height of chest. She was too short to measure. I'm too tiny. I'm too tiny. Okay. Amend the Controlled Drug and Substance Act and the Cannabis Act to provide and clarify authorities by which computer data may be examined. Okay, I do not see the problem people have with this. These all seem like things that make sense to me. It's certainly not George W. Bush fucking wiretapping your phone. You know what I mean? I don't feel like this is giving up any rights and freedoms, because you still have your right to privacy for your mail. You still have your right to privacy to your phone. It's simply like, when there is a legitimate warrant, they can go looking at your shit, which is reasonable. Oh yeah, glasses. Yeah, that's right. That's on your driver's license. Yeah. I'd prefer immigrants know the rules of the road and have the DMV try to enforce immigration laws. Criminalizing immigrants makes everyone less safe. That's a really funny idea. Good morning. Hello, welcome. So yeah, I'm not seeing, I'm certainly not seeing, like, proposes to prevent claims from even reaching Immigration and Refugee Board. Like, where? I didn't see that anywhere. Admittedly, we didn't read through the whole fucking thing. We looked at the summary, right? Like, again, this is a big fucking document. Like, I have seen, like, this is part 9, and that's page 70. Part 8 is page 35. So 35 to 70 is, like, the fucking part they're talking about. Like, it's not, this is incredibly big. And, like, I've seen people complain that they're trying to pack too much into this, and that's not acceptable. And they're trying to, like, put it through too quickly and not giving enough time. But they've had this for, like, 2 months. Right now it's on its 3rd reading. So that's what this is right here. If I hit play on this is them reading it.
So the opposition in the Senate, the opposition in the House of Commons continues to support Bill C-5, though we are skeptical, optimistic, but skeptical that the government doesn't have the political will to get it done. And we're becoming even more skeptical that the way they are dealing with our First Nations people is a continuous replica of errors we've seen in the past. Thank you, God.
So this is the Senate in Canada, and they're discussing, I think did they say C5? I thought it was C2 that they were covering. C2 passed, regardless, right? Liberals' major project bill passes the House of Commons with conservative support. So this is being accepted across party lines, right? So, like, if we go through and we take a look down here, we can see House wraps up for the summer after passing bill that fast-tracks nation-building projects. Right? The Liberal government's major project legislation passed in the House of Commons on Friday evening as MPs wrapped up the spring parliamentary sitting. Bill C-5, the One Economy Act. Oh no, C-5 is right. Why do I keep thinking it's C-2? It's C-5. I'm fucking losing my mind. Essentially gives Cabinet the ability to pick certain projects to speed through the regulatory process with an eye to projects that can deliver economic boost to Canada. Right? So there's been pushback from First Nations saying that they don't feel like that they're going to be consulted properly. So there was an amendment made to it to make that more clear. Carney spoke about that and said, hey, this was always intended, but the first pass of the bill, I guess, didn't make that clear enough. So we've added it in to make it more clear that nothing is going through without First Nations. First Nations also complained they did not get to see the advancement of the bill went through without them going over it, but they were given the bill a month ahead of time. So I'm kind of like, I don't really understand your complaint. Like, is it too big? But I mean, I can understand if it's too big. Oh no, this one's C2 and the other one is C5. Oh my God, I'm getting so confused. Which one am I looking at? Good God, which one is this? This one is Bill C2. The one they're talking about is C5. The one that passed is C2. Okay, the one we've been reading is C5. No, the one we're reading is C2. We've been reading C2, C5 passed, they're discussing C5 now in the Senate. Good God, this article is complaining about Bill C2 and calling it a MAGA border bill. Alright, sorry. Fuck me, dude. This one is C5. Yes, Bill C5. So Bill C5 is now doing its 3rd reading because things, when they're processed and changed, have to do readings in the House. So now they're doing. Yeah, I'm getting my C's mixed up. So right now, they're doing their 3rd reading of the bill. Right. So when a bill passes, it goes through again. Right. So if anybody wants to watch it, I don't know if you're gonna have access to this if you're out of the country, but that's the link to it. Good God. Anyway. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you this because it was funny.
Who have no confidence that Donald Trump will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs, and Germany beats them all at 81%. And Canada, traditionally, which had been quite an ally of the United States. You see that 77% have no confidence that Donald Trump will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. It is a rout in the no confidence column, Jessica.
Yeah, I can't. Those numbers are telling quite a story. Okay, so let's talk about the host country in particular, of course, Canada.
This is the G7 summit. So they asked countries and polled people about whether or not they trusted America, and the answer was like, fuck no, across the board. Nobody believes Trump is actually going to do the right thing on behalf of the world. Right. And I wanted to show you guys this one too. So let's see. Oh, no, this is the wrong one. See, I'm still getting them confused. This one, and this one are all talking about Bill C2. This one and this one are talking about Bill C5, which is the building bill. The one that's like, hey, we want to get our projects through, we want to be able to build, maybe we're going to do a pipeline. Let me talk about pipelines for a second, all right? I'm not the biggest fan of pipelines. When Trudeau put through a pipeline, I was like, I get it. I'm not a fan. I wouldn't pick it, but I understand. And now they're talking about another pipeline. Right, there's one either going through, there's two proposed ports that are being talked about being utilized. One is all the way out east, and the other one is at Hudson's Bay. Right, so for anybody who doesn't know what Canada looks like, Canada's got this, like, Canada comes across, right, and it dips down, and it goes bloop, and then also, like, then continues up and over here. This bloop down part of water, that's Hudson's Bay. Really big fucking attachment to the ocean. It's very large. I don't know how to express how big. Much bigly. Big and beautiful. So, Manitoba, you know what? Let me just pull up a map. You know, I'm just gonna pull up Google Maps. I'm just gonna pull up fucking Google Maps. Alright. Here. Ta-da! This is Canada. Alright? Canada is all of this. This is Canada all the way up here. This is all Canada. Right? Then there's Greenland. Right? And then there's a bunch of stuff over here that's all considered Canada. Right? Okay? Here's Russia. We don't like Russia. Alright? Got it? You'll notice Hudson's Bay is right here. It's really fucking big. So, for example, this is Texas. You could fit like 3 Texases in Hudson's Bay. Alright? This is Texas. This is Ontario. You could fit like 3 fucking Ontarios, or so 3 Texases in an Ontario. You could fit like 6 Texas in a fucking Quebec. Alright? So Hudson's Bay is really fucking big. And you will notice that Hudson's Bay is in Quebec. The very tippy where it comes out here for the passages, right, is Newfoundland. You'll also notice that Hudson's Bay comes out here into Baffin towards the Arctic, right? And it also comes out to the Labrador Sea into the North Atlantic. All right? Gulf of Canada. But it's bigger than the Hudson's Bay is bigger than the Gulf of Mexico. It's like twice the size of the Gulf of Mexico. All right. Oh, you're right. I should use Google Earth. Google Earth is better. Let's switch to Google Earth. Hudson's Bay is bigly. I don't want to give you a profile. Just let me look at Google Explore Earth. Thanks. Spanx. Ta-da! Alright, where are we? That looks like Australia. Ta-da! There's Hudson's Bay. I told you, it's fucking big. Can I, like... I don't want to... Can I... Well, there we go. Ta-da! Hudson's Bay. Gulf of Mexico. Hudson's Bay. They're close to the same size. Yeah. Alright. Yeah, okay, fair enough. They're about the same size. Alright. Anyway, Hudson's Bay is huge. So, we're getting distracted. So you'll notice Newfoundland, Quebec, right? This is Quebec. All that's Quebec. Ontario, Manitoba, and Nunavut. Right? Hudson's Bay borders 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 provinces. Right? 5. Right? Alberta's over here. Alberta's like our big... Alberta and some of Saskatchewan are like our big oil producer is Alberta. Stop. Don't do that. Don't. Thank you. Don't. All right. So they want to build a pipeline through British Columbia, and there is already a fucking pipeline out here. Building through Alberta... Like, this seems like it's not very far. This seems like it's way further, right? There's a really big difference as soon as you look at the elevation. The problem is all of this shit. They're called the Rocky Mountains. If you want to go through from Calgary, or if you want to go through from Fairview, and you want to get to fucking Vancouver Island, you need to drill, baby, drill through the fucking mountains. Or try and build up and over and around them. Good fucking luck. Not only is that incredibly expensive, who's gonna foot the bill for the risk of that? Generally, a country has to foot the bill to some degree. Right? To some degree. And to ensure that, like, at least the project will get done. However... this is flat as fuck. These are the prairies, my guys. This is flat as fuck, straight shot. Bow! Easy. Easy. So Hudson's Bay is being... what are the Rocky Mountains made of? Like, what kind of rock is it? Let's see. Geology of the Rocky Mountains. I don't know. Well, that doesn't answer my question at all. What type of rock is it? I mean, I imagine it's a mix, but... Rocky Mountains were formed, blah, 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 blah. Oldest rock is Precambrian metamorphic rock. Precambrian sedimentary argillite. I don't fucking... and also many kilometers of limestone and dolomite. According to Wikipedia. Anyway. Stop distracting me. Rocks. Okay, what was I saying? So right now there is there's a proposal that Hudson's Bay be used as a launching point for an oil pipeline, right? The other one is to go through Labrador, right? Where the fuck is New Brunswick? Oh, there it is. You could go through Labrador, you could go through New Brunswick and out into the Atlantic, right? So those are the two main options that people are talking about. And people are upset, or they don't like the idea of doing another pipeline. And I think I would rather not. However, I think it might be a necessary step. I think it might be both pragmatic and ultimately the better option out of the two options. The two options being build a pipeline or don't build a pipeline, right? There's only two options. I think building this type pipeline with intent and not just willy-nilly might be might be the best option. So, and there's a couple of factors that have like are in my brain when I'm thinking about this. One of the factors is that is economically potentially makes us a lot of money by selling oil. And we can market it as ethically sourced because we're not Saudi Arabia. That's not really that important. That's more of like a off the top to get the economic portion out of the way, because I don't think the economic one is as important or as viable as my other point, which is we are working towards green energy. There are other parts of the world like France, Germany, parts of the UK. Britain is doing something. Britain's doing something, all right? There's a coalition like the Paris Accords that is about, like Japan and China are all working on reducing their emissions, right? However, that's not something that happens overnight. Working on green energy is not something that happens overnight. So if we can supply the oil in the meantime while we transition into more green energy, and the point of building the pipeline is to enable countries that are not in the position to start shifting to green energy have access to energy where they don't have to be taken advantage of by dictators, right? So, like, who's producing oil right now? Canada's producing oil, right? Russia's producing oil. Saudi Arabia is producing oil. Those are like some of the big three oil producers, right? So I'm not listing everybody because we'd be here forever, but would you rather a country that is less developed not have any power in the meantime? Right? Oil will still be needed. Yeah, the goal is never to get rid of oil entirely. It's to stop relying on it so heftily forever and just burning it all out and killing ourselves in the process, right? The goal isn't to never use oil, it's to lessen it so that way our reserves of oil that we do have access to last longer and do less damage, right? So if Canada, Norway, France, UK, let's just call it the EU, right? Because I said France and Germany, but the EU, right? Australia, New Zealand, China, right? If everybody who is capable of shifting into green energy start shifting into green energy, having that oil as our reserve between point A and point B, which we're looking at 100 years before we're ready to completely stop using oil except for very specific refinement purposes. And as long as this pipeline does not overdo our emission goals, right? So if we were to do a pipeline and the processes for that pipeline still have that emission. So right now Canada has an emissions cap, right? Polyev and the Conservatives have tried to present that emissions cap as if it is a anti-drilling, anti-energy bill. It's not. It's an emissions cap. It means that if you are doing and processing and doing something, you cannot go above this amount. You're allowed to make as much as you want, as long as you are not emitting more than this much. And as long as you're not emitting more than this much, the idea is that we remain under the amount that is reasonable or to be expected via the scientists talking about climate change, right? That's the point. So if the pipeline that we produce does not go over that emissions cap, throughout its process while we move into green energy, and it enables other countries that are not in the position to make that shift yet to maintain a reasonable quality of life and not be reliant on places like America and places like Russia. It might be the better of the two options of just not. Because the other option is we don't invest in the pipeline at all. Right? And if we don't invest in the pipeline at all, we're not selling our oil. Other countries don't have other options for choosing oils and choosing potentially oils that are not as damaging. Right? So, like, America doesn't give a shit about its emissions anymore. Drill, baby, drill. So, places that are more like-minded countries might be willing or would have a more desire to buy Canadian oil than American oil or Russian oil. Right? So it's a matter of like, the pipeline might be the best of both worlds that we do in the meantime as we're moving towards green energy initiatives. This is why I say, like, I don't entirely agree with the pipeline, but a pipeline with a plan, a pipeline with a long-term initiative, I'm a little bit more convinced by something like that. You might be able to sell me on the pragmatism for having a pipeline. If you just want to say, oh, we want to get rich because we're going to drill oil and we're going to sell it to everybody, that's not a plan. That's incredibly short-term thinking. That's not an investment. In my opinion. Pipelines are usually safer than truck to rail. Yeah, there's when an incident happens with a pipeline, it's a big deal, but it doesn't happen as often as like a truck going over. It also lessens traffic. There's no emissions from thing moving from point A to point B in the same way. I shouldn't say no, it's just not the same. More rail would be good. More rail would be great. Give me a train. And then this is the last thing I want to talk about today. So let me pull this up.
Definitely get out of Canada. I could definitely get out of Canada. They tax me 54%. So $1 million, I'm paying $540,000 in tax. Then when I go to buy something, I'm paying 15% tax. And like when I bought my McLaren, there's a 20% surcharge. It's called a luxury tax. I would immediately have like a net worth of, it would be like a third up just from moving to the States. Because like, think if you buy $1 million car, I have to pay $150,000 in tax plus the $200,000 on top of that extra. So it's $350,000 plus to get that $1 million car, I had to take out $2 million because I had to pay 1.08 million whatever dollars. So $2 million I have to make to get 1 million, but I actually have to pay 350,000 more. So I have to actually make 2.7 million to buy a $1 million car, which is going to go down in value as soon as I drive it off the lot. But we have free healthcare. How do you think that's being paid for? And then when I go to the doctor, like after 4 years waiting for shoulder surgery, we're not going to do it. I don't like the healthcare system at all. I'd rather have the States where you just pay as you need it. I could definitely...
Surprise, surprise. A rich person would rather pay for priority on a non-priority surgery. You know, he could just go to the States and get the surgery, right? Like, he could just, nothing's stopping him from traveling to the States to get the surgery. Also, yeah, that's not how it works. I get a kick out of this because you'll notice that he never said he he wanted to buy a McLaren and couldn't because the taxes were too high on it. He just said, oh, but I had to take out $2 million instead of $1 million to buy my McLaren. This is the most entitled ass fucking shit I've ever heard in my life. Rich man complains about rich man things. It's so funny. It's so funny. There's literally, if you have that much money, there's nothing, one, stopping you from leaving and going to America and living in America, and two, going to just go get the surgery in America. I agree that there's issues with our healthcare system, but the waiting issue is not a tax issue. The waiting issue is the tax is not being utilized properly to enable our our healthcare system to be more efficient and more effective, because they keep getting cut. So if we stop cutting that and investing that, and maybe we should tax you more to help enable that. You want to speed your surgery up? Pay an extra $1 million a year. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever fucking heard in my life. Like, sorry? Like, what do you mean? Yeah, you could buy the Trump card. Like, I'm gonna play it again. Like, even listen to him. It's so whiny.
Definitely get out of Canada. They tax me 54%. So $1 million, I'm paying $540,000 in tax. Then when I go to buy something, I'm paying 15% tax. And like when I bought my McLaren, there's a 20% surcharge. It's called a luxury tax. I would immediately.
So here's the other question. You're paying 15% on tax when you buy something at the grocery store, and how expensive are your eggs?
We have like a net worth of, it would be like a third up just from moving to the States.
And what are you gonna, why does that hold value to you? If you've bought your McLaren and you didn't have a problem getting your McLaren, right? And you have your luxury life, what does being up 2 to 3 net worth points, what value does that hold to you? And why do you think the value that holds to you in the perception of other people is worth more than the value an additional $500,000 can do to society on a whole? The wealthiest Americans at 37% of their top dollar in 2024. The top federal tax in Canada is 33%. Yeah, I don't believe that he's paying 57% taxes. So, like, what is the highest Canadian tax bracket? Let's find out. Tax bracket for individuals. The highest tax bracket is 33%. If you're making over $253,414. So no, you're fucking not. Well, what if it's not an individual? What if it's tax bracket for a company? Corporate tax rates. What's the corporate tax rate? 38% on your taxable income, 28% after the federal tax. Then a next tax rate of 15% or a 1.5 or a 9%, and you get a small business deduction. So in no way is this liar paying 57% tax, income tax. Not happening. It's not happening at all. It's absolutely bullshit. So anyway, lying fucking liar who lies about their income on the internet to try to fucking make people feel bad for their rich life not being rich enough, I guess. I don't know. That's gonna be it for me for now. We'll probably come back and talk about our big beautiful building bill in next week maybe, and we'll see what happened and see what's gone on since then. Good luck, everybody. I'll be live on Debate Hub Official on Saturday, talking about politics with Landon, people that are smarter than me, Landon, Dapper, and Manya. I'll be back soon, and I'll see you tomorrow. Over on Debate Hub, not here. Bye! Not tomorrow, sorry. Top Hats off tomorrow, Debate Hub on Saturday. Okay, bye!